We live in a world that worships the idea of love. Fairy tales, movies, music, all promising that love will complete you. But what if that very promise is what's keeping you stuck? What if love, at the wrong time or with the wrong person, is not the cure, but the distraction? The harsh truth is, many people confuse emotional chaos with depth, and they mistake attachment for purpose. Real growth often demands isolation, discipline, and a ruthless focus on your goals. Love that isn't aligned with your path will drain you, not elevate you. And in that distraction, you'll lose time, clarity, and often yourself. That's why some of the most successful people are not the most loved, but the most focused. Love is beautiful, but without boundaries and timing, it becomes a trap disguised as intimacy. If you want power, clarity, and legacy, learn to see love for what it truly is. Not all love is created equal. While the idea of love is often glorified as inherently good, healing, and transformative, the reality is far more complex. Love in its purest form can be empowering. It can be a force that fuels your growth, sharpens your mind, and supports your vision. But not every version of love offers that. Some forms of love are rooted in fear, insecurity, control, or unresolved trauma. These are the types of love that don't elevate you. They stall you. They keep you caught in cycles of overthinking, emotional chaos, and self-doubt. You begin to question your path, your priorities, and eventually your own identity. The very thing that should feel like support becomes a source of emotional weight. When love becomes about constant reassurance, fixing someone else's problems, or sacrificing your peace to maintain a connection, it's no longer love, it's survival. And when you're in survival mode, you're not building, evolving, or creating anything of value. You're just trying to stay afloat. That's the danger of the wrong kind of love. It convinces you to shrink. It rewards your silence, your sacrifice, your hesitation. It demands your energy but offers little in return. You start missing deadlines, losing focus, and drifting away from your goals. You find yourself justifying behavior that goes against your standards. It becomes normal to trade long-term purpose for short-term comfort. Sometimes the most dangerous kind of love is the one that looks calm on the surface, but slowly drains your drive underneath. You're emotionally bonded, but mentally disconnected from yourself. You're physically present, but spiritually absent from your mission. This type of love doesn't challenge you to become more. It just helps you tolerate being less. It convinces you that settling is stability, and that emotional drama is passion. But deep down, something feels off. That's your inner self warning you that you're being held back. Elevating love is not about how much someone says they care. It's about how they respond to your vision. Do they encourage your focus or distract you from it? Do they feed your discipline or tempt your weakness? Love that elevates doesn't interrupt your flow. It protects it. It holds space for your silence, respects your ambition, and supports your boundaries. Love that stalls you wants you available 24/7. Love that elevates you understands that sometimes silence is where greatness is built. The truth is, love is not always soft. Real love is often sharp. It demands honesty. It forces both people to grow. But the wrong kind of love wants comfort, not evolution. It wants to keep things the same even if that means killing your potential. And if you're not careful, that love will become the reason you never become what you were meant to be. It will disguise stagnation as loyalty. It will confuse emotional intensity with depth. And one day, you'll look back and realize you didn't just lose time, you lost pieces of yourself. Emotional overload is one of the most underestimated forces that sabotage progress. Not because emotions are inherently bad, but because unchecked emotions hijack your ability to think clearly. When you're emotionally overwhelmed, angry, anxious, heartbroken, or even overly excited, your mental energy diverts from logic to survival. The part of your brain responsible for long-term planning, decision-making, and reasoning takes a back seat while emotional impulses take the wheel. You might feel the need to react quickly, explain yourself, defend your value, or chase closure, and all of this happens at the expense of strategy. Strategic clarity demands space, detachment, and discipline. It requires the ability to see 10 steps ahead, to delay gratification, to assess risk without being paralyzed by fear. But when you're in an emotional storm, your world shrinks. You become reactive instead of proactive. You overanalyze words, misinterpret silence, obsess over what-ifs, and make decisions just to ease your discomfort rather than to serve your higher goals. Emotional overload floods your inner system with noise, making it impossible to distinguish what matters from what's merely urgent. You become busy, but not effective. You move, but not forward. Emotions, especially when intense, can trick you into believing that urgency equals importance. You feel a pull to act immediately, to fix something, to speak your mind. But clarity often comes from restraint, not reaction. When you're emotionally charged, you're more likely to burn bridges, sabotage negotiations, trust the wrong people, or walk away from the right ones. Emotions cloud judgment and shift your focus from outcomes to egos. You stop playing the long game and start chasing emotional relief. In a world where wins are determined by patience, timing, and precision, emotional overload is like static in your mind's frequency. It drowns out the quiet signals that guide you towards success. You ignore red flags. You chase validation. You defend your feelings instead of refining your vision. And in that spiral, opportunities are lost not because you didn't have the talent, but because your focus was consumed by emotional noise. Emotional discipline doesn't mean suppressing how you feel. It means processing without impulsively reacting. It means creating internal structure so emotions pass through you, not rule you. You can feel deeply and still act strategically, but that requires mastery, the ability to pause, to zoom out, and to let discomfort exist without becoming your identity. If you don't manage your emotional bandwidth, you will find yourself exhausted by every disagreement, thrown off course by every delay, and consumed by relationships that don't deserve your energy. When you allow emotional overload to run your life, you lose your edge. You start making emotional decisions in business, in relationships, in personal growth. You start seeking comfort over growth, approval over truth, reaction over wisdom. Strategic clarity is built in the quiet moments when you can sit with the chaos and still see the next move clearly. It's not built in emotional chaos, but in regulated awareness. If you want to protect your future, protect your clarity. If you want to win long-term, regulate your emotional state like it's your most valuable currency. Because it is. Emotions can fuel you, but when they dominate you, they blind you. They keep you circling the same lessons, stuck in the same patterns, surrounded by the same distractions, and you never realize how much power you've lost. Not because you weren't smart enough, but because clarity doesn't survive in emotional noise. Focus is the silent architect behind every legacy, every transformation, every empire that was built from the ground up. It is not loud, it does not seek applause, and yet it is the reason some rise while others remain stuck in cycles of chaos. Focus channels energy, filters noise, and turns ambition into action. It makes you dangerous in the best way, not because you fight harder, but because you no longer fight battles that don't matter. You stop reacting to every distraction, every opinion, every invitation to waste time. Focus eliminates the unnecessary, so that the essential can dominate. It creates a sense of internal order that external circumstances cannot disrupt. Distraction, on the other hand, is seductive. It disguises itself as connection, opportunity, or even relaxation, but underneath it feeds dependency. Distraction makes you chase, scroll, compare, and escape. It keeps you emotionally reactive and mentally scattered, never rooted in your own path. When you're distracted, your power leaks. You give away time to people who drain you. You give attention to problems that aren't even yours. You dilute your goals, trying to keep up with what others are doing. And slowly, you start needing the distraction to feel normal. You crave it. You depend on it. It becomes the default mode of existence. Constant stimulation without purpose. Focus is uncomfortable because it requires discipline. It forces you to say no, to sit with silence, to work when no one's watching. It demands that you let go of instant gratification in favor of long-term reward. But within that discipline lies freedom. You begin to realize that time is your most valuable currency, and attention is your most powerful investment. You start protecting your mornings, guarding your energy, choosing your circle with ruthless intent. You don't need to impress anyone because your results speak for themselves. You don't need approval because your path is clear, and you don't need constant noise because the clarity inside you becomes louder than the distractions around you. People who live in distraction often need others to tell them what to do, how to feel, who to be. They outsource direction because they haven't spent enough time in solitude to hear their own voice. They rely on validation to keep moving, on conflict to feel alive, on entertainment to escape. That dependency isn't just emotional, it's strategic weakness. It keeps you small, reactive, and easily manipulated. Distraction makes you predictable, and predictability is vulnerability. If your focus can be stolen, so can your vision. If your mind is always occupied, your mission will always be delayed. Empires are not built on motivation alone. They're built on the ability to focus when it's boring, when it's hard, when no one claps. They're built on the discipline to keep going when distractions feel more rewarding. Focus aligns your habits with your vision. It teaches you to move with intention instead of impulse. And over time, the compound effect of that clarity becomes unstoppable. What once seemed impossible becomes routine. What once drained you becomes irrelevant. You become untouchable not because you've avoided distraction once, but because you've built a lifestyle where distraction no longer has a seat at your table. Focus doesn't just build empires. It builds identity. It shapes who you become when no one's watching. And in a world addicted to noise, that makes you powerful in ways that most people will never understand. The right person in your life doesn't compete with your mission. They amplify it. They don't pull you away from your goals with emotional drama, insecurity, or distraction. Instead, they hold space for your vision, challenge you to grow, and bring calm to your storm. In a world where relationships are often driven by validation, comfort, or fear of loneliness, finding someone who aligns with your purpose rather than derailing it is rare and powerful. You'll know this person not by how loudly they praise you, but by how consistently they support your direction, even when it doesn't benefit them directly. They respect the bigger picture, because they're not just investing in who you are today, but in who you're becoming. Misaligned connections cost more than time, they cost momentum. When you're with someone who doesn't understand or respect your mission, subtle sabotage begins to take place. It doesn't always look like resistance. It might look like constant need for attention, emotional manipulation, guilt trips, or unspoken resentment when you choose purpose over comfort. You start compromising your boundaries, your schedule, your clarity. What was once a clear path becomes blurred by emotional chaos. You find yourself constantly explaining your choices, defending your ambitions, or diluting your dreams so someone else can feel secure. This isn't love, it's resistance in disguise. Alignment means more than shared interests or chemistry. It means shared values, respect for each other's time and energy, and a willingness to grow side by side without becoming each other's obstacles. The right person doesn't ask you to shrink so they can feel bigger. They don't need you to be less intense, less driven, less focused, just so they can be comfortable. They honor your solitude, understand your grind, and don't make your ambition feel like abandonment. They challenge your weaknesses, not your priorities. They help sharpen your vision, not scatter it. When someone truly aligns with your mission, you don't have to constantly choose between love and purpose. You get to merge the two into something higher. Conversations are not filled with tension about where you're going or why you work so hard. They're fueled by curiosity, ideas, shared visions, and mutual growth. They're not threatened by your independence. They're inspired by it. They don't cling to you out of fear. They walk beside you in faith. And in doing so, they make the path lighter, not heavier. Choosing the wrong person, on the other hand, quietly chips away at your potential. The wrong relationship might not destroy you in one day, but it will slowly erode your self-trust, your energy, your fire. You start doubting yourself, censoring your goals, and rearranging your life for someone who would never do the same in return. Eventually, you look around and realize you've built a life that no longer looks like your own, and the cost of realignment is painful. That's why being selective isn't arrogance. It's protection of purpose. The right person sees your mission as part of their own, even if they're not directly involved in it. They support your quiet days, your intense focus, your moments of doubt, and your celebrations. They don't compete. They contribute. They don't distract. They center. They know that love isn't about possession. It's about elevation. And when you find someone who aligns with your mission, you don't lose yourself. You expand into who you were always meant to become. Discipline strips away the noise. It isolates you from the comfort of crowds, the instant gratification of distractions, and the superficial validation most people rely on to feel alive. It feels lonely, not because you are truly alone, but because few are willing to make the sacrifices you are making. Discipline demands structure when the world offers chaos. It demands self-accountability when others look for excuses. And in that solitude, where there is no applause, no external praise, and no shortcuts, you begin to feel the sting of separation. But it's the kind that breeds transformation. The path of discipline is not adorned with comfort. Waking up early, saying no to temptations, focusing when others are relaxing. These are all small deaths of ease that most people avoid. The lonely feeling comes from the realization that you can no longer relate to people who live without structure, who chase pleasure over purpose, and who measure success by appearances instead of consistency. You outgrow conversations, habits, even friendships, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Discipline isolates you not as punishment, but as preparation. It removes distractions so power can accumulate in silence. In that silence, you become dangerous, not in a violent way, but in a focused, unshakable way. You begin to see things clearly. You realize that most people are running in circles, endlessly entertained, yet internally empty. You no longer need noise to feel alive because the quiet becomes your power source. While others chase stimulation, you build habits. While others look for external motivation, you rely on internal systems. While others quit when it's hard, you endure, and that consistency starts to compound. The silence of discipline is misunderstood because society glorifies noise. We're told that busyness equals success, that being everywhere means you're doing something right. But true power is never loud. It's patient, precise, and often invisible until the results become undeniable. The one who trains in silence becomes the one who dominates in public. The one who sacrifices today becomes the one others envy tomorrow. But that phase when you're doing the work, feeling unseen, questioning if it's worth it, is where most people give up. They mistake the silence for failure. They confuse loneliness with wrong direction. But in reality, that very silence is where strength is forged. Every disciplined act you commit to rewires your identity. You become someone who follows through, someone who doesn't negotiate with weakness. And that self-trust is what builds power, not the loud, ego-driven kind, but the quiet certainty that no matter what comes, you'll handle it. You no longer rely on the world to keep you going because you've built an internal world that is stronger, more grounded, and more focused than anything external could ever offer. Discipline will feel lonely because it sets you apart. It demands that you choose long-term reward over short-term pleasure, and that choice isolates you from the masses. But it also liberates you. You are no longer controlled by urges, habits, or external pressure. You become sovereign. You walk your own path. You set your own standard. And in time, the very silence that once felt cold becomes sacred. It becomes your edge, your advantage, your shield, because while others are distracted by the noise, you're sharpening your focus, building your resilience, and quietly rising into the kind of power that needs no permission to exist. In the end, the truth is simple, but sobering. Discipline will set you apart. And that separation can feel like solitude. But within that solitude, something extraordinary happens. You stop chasing validation. You stop waiting for the world to understand your grind. You realize that real power is not loud. It is earned quietly, in the spaces where no one is watching and no one is applauding. The silence you once feared becomes the very forge in which your strength is shaped. And while the world continues to trade depth for distraction, you will rise, not because you followed the noise, but because you dared to face the quiet. Stay committed. Stay grounded. Let the silence build you, because eventually the results will speak for you, and the world will listen.